with you. Tonight, I want us to look at this idea of how to get a good night's sleep. And a lot of you said you studied this afternoon by taking a nap. So I thought that was really cute. And hopefully when I say hold up your notebooks in a moment, you're not going to hold up pillows. But I do want us to talk about this idea of being able to have a good night's sleep or to sleep peacefully. In Psalm 116, verse 7, that was read for us a moment ago, return to your rest, O my soul, for the Lord has dealt bountifully with you. To know that there are so many reasons why we should be able to lay our head on our pillow at night and to sleep through the night peacefully, knowing that all is going to be well, even when nothing is well. And that sounds like a contradictory statement, but as we'll be looking at tonight, hopefully we'll gain a better understanding of that and how it is that one of the greats, David, was able to obtain a good night's sleep in the midst of things such as that. So if you're ready for the three words, let's see your notebooks. All right, three things that are very important when it comes to not turning your presentation off is this, the idea of protection, approval. Okay, what are we doing here? All right, protection, approval, and purpose. These three things are really important when it comes to being able to get a good night's sleep. Protection, because you want to know that you've got some sense of safety during the night. I remember growing up that we could always leave our doors unlocked. My grandparents didn't even have any locks on their doors. It's not that way now. And most of the time we have locks not just to protect us from people that may come into our neighborhood or into our community, but sometimes even our neighbors and even sometimes a family member locking the door so they don't break in on you. But protection is one of those things that's needed. When you think about approval, it's good to be able to go to bed at night and know that you've done a good day's work, that you've done something that's worthy, to know that God looks down upon you with loving kindness because you've put in a good day and you can now sleep. And lastly, purpose, knowing that tomorrow morning you have something to get up for. You have something to look forward to. And that it's not, even though it may be difficult, it's not going to be something that's a drudgery. It's not going to be dreadful. It's not another day of disappointment and heartache and despair where you have nothing to gain hope and encouragement from. And so these are some things that I think are very, very important when it comes to being able to find true, meaningful rest during the night. Not all sleep is good. And sleep patterns will sometimes reveal things about what's going on with us, whether we're sleeping or not sleeping. There are times where people have, physical problems, and these physical problems may keep you from sleeping. But it may also be that there's some emotional or spiritual things that are going on. And because of that, we either sleep or lose sleep during the night. The Proverbs has a lot to say about sleep, and in one of the passages in Proverbs chapter 6, verses 10 and 11, it says, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come upon you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. Here is somebody that because he wants to sleep more, he doesn't get anything done. And his poverty is going to come because he's lazy. Now, a spiritual application would also be that there are things, spiritually speaking, that we should be about taking care of. But because we want to avoid those things, maybe we go to sleep instead. One of the things that is very common among those who are suffering through depression is wanting to sleep and feeling a need to sleep and a desire to sleep. There have been people I've talked to over the years that, what is the one most important thing that you look forward to every day when they're going through some of these spiritual battles? And it was naps or going to sleep. Because they didn't want to think about it. It was a way of escape. But they weren't handling anything along the way. Also, there's other passages that teach us, such as in Daniel chapter 6 and verse 18, where it says, now the king went to his palace and he spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him. Also, his sleep went from him. Sometimes we feel guilty, either because we did something unknowingly or maybe even on purpose. Here we have King Darius, who has had to put Daniel in the lion's den because of the decree that he had signed, not knowing that this was going to be something that was going to cause Daniel to be put in this lion's den. But he can't go back on his word. And because he had done this thing, now Daniel, understandably, is in grave danger. And he feels bad about that thing. And because of it, his sleep, he cannot be soothed during the night. There are other passages that say things such as Psalm 32, 3 and 4, when we have a guilty conscience about things. That here the psalmist says that when I kept silent, my bones grew old through my groaning all the day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My vitality was turned into the drought of summer. And obviously you would not be able to get any kind of rest when those things are happening. And we know that physical rest, being able to get a good night's sleep and resting during that sleep is important both for our physical and our mental and our spiritual and emotional well-being. And if we lose those things, a lot of other things will begin to unravel. And so we need to be able to take care of those things that we can. The psalmist says that he had to confess these things to God. And he had to repent of these things in order that the Spirit of the Lord might revive him once again. In Ephesians 5 and verse 12, or Ecclesiastes rather 5 and verse 12, it says, "The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not permit him to sleep." Sometimes we lean upon the wrong things to give us a sense of security, a sense of protection, a sense of purpose. And because that thing is a false thing, a thing that is fleeting, a thing that can be easily taken away from us, a thing that Jesus says a thief can break in and steal, or it's going to just waste away with time. Because we lean upon those types of things, the wise man tells us, don't trust in those things. They will not give you a good night's sleep. But if you're a laboring man, whether you're full or hungry, doesn't matter, because you know that you put in a good day's work and you'd be able to sleep at night. And so sleep has a way of revealing some things about us. And I know there's been a lot of times where at the end of the day, I am exhausted, I am tired, I go to lay my head down on the pillow, and all of a sudden my brain tries to solve all of the world's problems, and it will not let me rest. And it doesn't matter if you turn on ambient noise, you turn on one of my past sermons, nothing seems to help. And so when you go through moments like that, we do need to ask ourselves, and I got several text messages and emails and comments about this particular lesson, and I thought I probably would, but it's obviously something that we all struggle with from time to time. And so where we need to begin is to ask ourselves, so what is it that's keeping me up? What is it that's keeping me from being able to relax? And it doesn't mean that whatever that is not a serious matter, not an important thing. But when I do sleep, when I do have those moments where I'm not like Jesus, where I'm staying up all night praying to God, but this is something where it's time for me to be able to just go to sleep. Because there is a time to stay up all night. There is a time to make sure that you're dealing with these things that we've been talking about. And there is a time where you should not be laying your head down because you are not in a safe position in relationship with God. And that is not a time to just go to sleep. That's a time to do something, even in the middle of the night. But there's also a time where we should be able to lay our head on our pillow, to close our eyes, to not worry and have anxiety about things going on in this world, and just get a good night's sleep. So let's go to the third psalm. And let's notice some of these things that's going to happen for us to be there if we're going to have a good night's sleep. Someone once said that anxiety is living tomorrow's problems before they ever even come. And sometimes in our minds when we're going through those scenarios and conversations in our head, that's what we're doing. We're trying to live in the future before it's ever even got there. David, when he writes the third psalm, is on the run from Absalom, his son. And if you back up, you remember that when David had that affair with Bathsheba, and the son that was born as a result of that affair, God took from him. But he also let David know that from that point on, even though David had repented, from that point on, his house was going to be one that was going to be filled with turmoil, with violence, with bloodshed. And it was going to be bad for David. And David seemed to be a very absent father many times from that point forward. On one occasion, Absalom's sister Tamar was raped by her half-brother. And this was something that understandably was upsetting to the family, Absalom especially, and David did not get involved in that very much. A couple years go by, and Absalom finds a way to have his half-brother come out to meet him and some others, and then he has him killed. And still David doesn't really do anything dramatic about that thing. He allows Absalom to come back to Jerusalem in safety, but he can't bear to see his son. And so he has his son live somewhere else, and he's there for quite some time. And so finally Absalom sets fire to some fields, trying to get his father's attention. And still there's basically nothing. And so what ends up happening is Absalom decides that his father is not fit to be a king and begins to try to overthrow his father. David knows his life is in danger, and so he flees from Jerusalem. And it gets so bad that there are other people who are seeing what's going on. And Absalom is so, he's such a charismatic figure, if you will, that people are willing to listen to him. David goes out into the countryside, fleeing and hiding from his son. And there's this one man named Shimei who starts cursing David and throwing rocks at the man who threw a rock and killed Goliath. And he's throwing rocks at the king and cursing him. And the people around David say, well, we need to take his head off his shoulders. David said, no, he's just speaking as God told him to speak. Maybe after this, God will bless me. That's when this psalm was written. That's the time period that this psalm was written. And so David writes this psalm when all the world has seemed to turn against him. Even his own family, his own country, the throne is in danger, his life is in danger, his own son hates his guts and wants to kill him. And this is what David says, Lord, how they have increased who trouble me. Many are they who rise up against me. Many are they who say of me, there is no help for him in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield for me, my glory and the one who lifts up my head. I cried to the Lord with my voice, and he heard me from his holy hill. I lay down and slept, awoke, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for you have struck all my enemies on the cheekbone. You have broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing is upon all your people. So here in this third psalm, one of the things that we see at the beginning of it is that David is like in so many of the psalms, he's really encapsulating the entire human experience, both with the depression and distress that he is feeling because of his situation, his anger and frustration at his enemies and what he wants God to do to them. He's very honest about that thing, but also his trust and his confidence in God who is going to be with him. And he has that whole human experience that is outlined here in this particular psalm. But one of the things you notice is that he does begin talking about in those first two verses how it was that all the world seems to be against him. And in verse 5, he says, I lay down and slept. Even with that many people that were around him, who were after him, he's on the run, he's hiding in caves and in the forest and things such as that, and he does not know if he's going to make it through the night. Somebody could be just like it was with David when he came upon Saul, and he would have been able to take Saul's life as Saul slept, but he chose not to because he was righteous in that. David was not being pursued by righteous men, and if they came upon David in the middle of the night, they would have been able to kill him. And yet David said, I slept. I lay down and I slept. And I got up the next morning, and the reason why is because the Lord protected me. And that was it. That to me is a very amazing thing. That David says, I laid down and I slept. You know, we're told in Psalm 127, if you'll turn over there with me, Psalm 127, verses 1 and 2. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who built it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he gives beloved sleep. He was able to go to sleep that night because God was watching over him. And even if his life was taken, it didn't matter how many guards David tried to set. If it was the night that God was not going to protect him from his enemy, that was going to be it. And it didn't matter. So how many times have we sat up all night long worrying? These people who are against David, verse 2, many are they who say of me, there is no help for him in God. How many times have you sat up during the night worrying about what other people are saying about you? What other people think about you? What other people may be thinking about you? How they look at you? We try to tell ourselves over and over again, it doesn't matter. But is it keeping me up at night? How many times have I sat up all night long worrying about maybe a family member, like David would have been, that they turned their back on God? How many times have I sat up all night long worried about a job? David was about to lose the kingdom, possibly. How long have we sat up all night long not knowing if we were just going to make it to the next day because of an illness that we might have. Unless the Lord guards the city, they labor in vain. There's no watchman that can keep us safe. And when you think about David's situation, what was more important? That the kingdom be preserved for David to rule in it, or for David's soul to be preserved? And no matter what it was that other people were saying about him, other people were saying, where's God to help him? There is no God that can deliver him. God's help is removed far from him. There are a lot of people who are saying things like that. But David knew the truth. David knew that God had forgiven. David knew that God had forgiven him and was watching over him and would preserve him. And David knew that God would protect him. See, when we lay our heads down at night, it ought to be that no matter what it is that's going on, we can't stop it. We can't stop all these things that are going on. They're going to continue. And people are going to say things about you that are not true. And people are not going to think God is with you and able to do anything for you. And in those moments, in that occasion, isn't it the most righteous thing that you can do to go to sleep and just wake up the next day? I mean, literally, the most godly thing you could do in the moment is it's time for you to go to bed, lay your head down, and go to sleep. Your God is protecting you. Your God is watching you. If you die during the night, haven't you won? Haven't you been rewarded? If you wake up the next day, you face the same troubles, the same trials, but your God is still there. And so David gives a real sense of security in this particular psalm about how we can indeed conquer all these different voices and all these problems that we might be having. And one of the ways in which David talks about that, notice that David says when he prays to God, in verse 7, "Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for you have struck all my enemies on the cheekbone. You have broken the teeth of the ungodly." A lot of times we look at prayer, especially in moments like this, as being one of those things where we're asking for mercy, we're asking for grace. And there's times for that, obviously. But sometimes maybe we need to look at prayer as being a battle cry. David says, "Arise, O Lord. Stand up, O God. Meet me on the battlefield, Lord, and do battle for me. My enemies are all around me, and it's time for me to go to sleep because I can't stay up anymore." What a great blessing to know that we don't have to stay awake all night because God is on the job. If you go to Psalm 121, notice this, Psalm 121, verses 1 through 4. Psalm 121 is starting at verse 1. Here it says, "I will lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help. My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep." We don't have to stay up all night worrying about it because God doesn't sleep. The watchman will fall asleep. He will abandon his post. You don't have the energy, the strength, the fortitude to be able to stay up all hours of every day and be vigilant, but God does. Nothing escapes his view, and he sees what's happening. And so when we pray to our God, it ought to be one of those things that is indeed like a battle cry. "Arise, O Lord, deliver me from these things that are oppressing me." He also points out that we need to be able to remember who God is. In verse 3, he says, "But you, O Lord, are a shield for me, my glory, and the one who lifts up my head." God is supposed to be to us a shield, a protector, a guardian, someone who surrounds us and protects us. He is to be the one who lifts our head up, who, when we feel like we ought to be, our eyes cast down. I mean, even the people in the land are throwing rocks at David and cursing him. And David, it just seems as helpless in the midst of all of it, but God is able to lift his head up again. But he also says this phrase, which I think is really interesting, what I want us to think about for a moment: "You are my glory." And that's a very interesting statement. In other words, God, you are the reason for splendor. You are the reason that I can say such things as this. You are the one that I give glory to, and you're the one that I speak of. You're the one that I love, and you're the one that I care for most often. So let me ask you this. Reason that most of us have problems sleeping is because we talk so much about our problem, and we glory so little in God. At the end of the day, are we still bemoaning the issues and the problems that are going on? Or are we able to sing the praise and the glory of our God? And is that enough? Because we mean it so much that we're able to sleep and not be afraid of what's going to happen. God is indeed supposed to be the one who is our protector and our sustainer, even in those darkest hours. He is our reason for boasting, and so we should not be spending most of our time worrying about our troubles. The thing about it is that there are times where God may not deliver us from the immediate issue, but God never, ever allows your soul to be taken captive by the things that are the most important things, those things that cause you to lose your soul. He will always protect you from those things if you will allow Him to be your shield. Your life can be taken. A storm can come through in the middle of the night and take you. Our houses can have disasters and catch fire. A thief can break in and not just take our possessions, but take our lives. But God does not sleep or slumber. God watches over for what is most important about us, and that's our soul. And that's why David is so easily able to go to sleep. And one last thing from this particular psalm is this, is that we need to stop listening to ourselves and start talking to ourselves in a good way. Stop listening to yourself. Many are they who are saying these things. Stop playing the what-if game in your mind. Stop sitting up all night long and worrying about, but what if this, but what if that, but what if this, but what if that, what if this, what if that? Yes, but if that happens, then maybe this is going to happen. You don't control any of that. None of that is in your purview. It is not within your realm. You don't rule over it. It is not your kingdom. It doesn't belong to you. You begin to hear things. And what you begin to hear is not just your own wayward thoughts. You begin to hear the thoughts of others. And you'll sit up all night long driving yourself insane trying to do that. Instead, you need to start talking to yourself about what you can do and what you should do. And the one thing that you can do and should do is this: lay down and go to sleep. This is not for you. Matthew 6, Jesus says this in verse 34. Sufficient is the day for its own troubles. Tomorrow take care of itself. Don't worry about those things. Don't be anxious for tomorrow. Those are what ifs. That's not yours. Sufficient for the day is its own troubles. But we do know that tomorrow what's going to happen? We're going to wake up and there's going to be troubles in that day. That's where we need to remember, like Lamentations 3, 22 and 23, where it talks about the mercies of the Lord are new every morning. So this is what Jesus says. This is what God says. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to have its own problems. But you know what you're also going to have tomorrow? In relation to all those problems, you've got all the tender mercies of God waiting on you. When the sun comes up, we ought to see it that, yes, there's problems. But instead of looking at all those problems, we ought to see that sunrise as being one of those things where God says, okay, I'm about to start showering you with all the blessings. So that you can face whatever it is you're facing today. And you don't have to worry about the next day. Tonight, when the day is over with, you'll be able to go to bed and sleep because I'm here. That's what David learned. And it's interesting that these first several Psalms are in a steady row of talking about how it is that we can sleep well. Notice the fourth Psalm, Psalm 4. This one was actually written, as it says in the introduction, with stringed instruments. And so what would usually happen in some of these Psalms that were written that way, and you'll see this throughout many of the Psalms, is this word Selah, S-E-L-A-H, Selah, which means pause. It was a pause that they would have like maybe a musical interlude that was there, but it was also a moment that as that musical interlude was going, you were supposed to stop and really concentrate upon what had just been said or sung in that psalm. So notice this in these first few verses. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You have relieved me in my distress. Have mercy on me and hear my prayer. How long, you sons of men, will you turn my glory to shame? How long will you love worthlessness and seek falsehood? So think about what was just said. And meditate upon what was just said. And then as the song continues, but know that the Lord has set apart for himself him who is godly. The Lord will hear when I call to him. Be angry and do not sin. Meditate within your heart on your bed and be still. And again, we're supposed to stop and really think and really meditate upon what was just said. That you don't just read through it as something that you quickly go through as an exercise. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. There are many who say, who will show us any good? Lord, lift up the light of your countenance upon us. You have put gladness in my heart, more than in the season that their grain and wine increased. I will both lie down in peace and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell safely. Again, he talks about how it is that you can find the ability to sleep at night and sleep in peace. And what David is talking about here is not the peace that he might have with people of the world, because he doesn't have that. But what David is talking about here is being able to sleep because he knows he's at peace with God. I've made my peace with God. And there are some things that I know as a result of that. And it's a lot easier to sleep when there are things that you know than it is when there's things that you don't know, can't control, or as we said a moment ago, the what ifs. But when we think about and concentrate upon the things that we absolutely know for certain, it makes sleep that much easier. So in this fourth psalm, he points out what some of those things are. One of the things that he says at the beginning of this, or in verses 4 and 5 of this, is that he belongs to God, and God is going to listen to him when he calls. That's what he says in those first few verses. I will call to the Lord. And the reason that God's going to hear me is because there are a lot of people who have loved worthlessness and falsehood. But in verse 3, the Lord has set apart for himself him who is godly, and the Lord will hear when I call to him. I've made my peace with God, and I know for a fact that I am serving the living God. And there may be a lot of problems and a lot of issues and a lot of pressures being placed upon me right now, but this is something that I know. I know that when I call to the Lord, I belong to him, and he is mine. And when I call to him, my God hears my cries. And it doesn't matter if it's in the morning, in the afternoon, in the middle of the night. It does not matter when it is. It doesn't matter where I'm at. I cry out to my God, and he listens to me. This is the reason why he could say in that third psalm that the Lord is my glory. The same way it is that it says that the woman is the glory of the man, God is the glory of us, and that he is there and he is always by our side. He is our helper continually, and we can always cry out to him. Also in this psalm, David says that there are a lot of people who do not have what I have. There are a lot of people who are following after worthless things. There are a lot of people who cannot, at the end of the day, quote 1 Peter 5, verse 7, that the Lord cares for you. Your burdens, he wants you to pour them out to him because he cares for you. There are a lot of people that Matthew 11 means nothing when Jesus said, come to me, you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. There are a lot of people who don't have that. Brethren, I don't know how it is, and I know I've heard many of you say this as well. I don't know how it is that people are making it through the things that are going on in the world right now without God. I don't know how they're making it. I don't know. I would not want to be going through what they're going through. I would not want to be setting up every night worried to death about what's going to happen with vaccines and pandemics and unrest and politics and everything else that's going on. I would rather trust in my God and be able to go to bed at night and sleep through the night at peace, knowing that, God, I belong to you. You are my God. I can cry to you anytime I want to, and you listen to me. And it doesn't matter what happens. I'm going to be just fine. I am going to be just fine. When your children were growing up, they did not twiddle their thumbs all night long trying to work out the world's problems. And the reason being is because they knew that mama and daddy were right there in the next room, and anytime they needed to get up out of their bed and go into their parents' room, you were going to listen to them. And you were going to be able to make it all right and tell them that they could go back to bed and not have to be afraid. And they trusted that, and they went to bed. Because they listened to you instead of all these other voices. They listened to you instead of those things that might be going through their mind. They listened to you instead of going through all the different what-if scenarios. God is mine. And brethren, we have things that the rest of the world does not have. They just don't have it. They don't enjoy this blessing, but we do. So we ought to be able to sleep well. We ought to be able to make it through the night and not be terrified of what may or may not happen during the night. Also, David points out in this particular psalm that the things that you do during the day are the things that really most directly affect you at night in your ability to sleep. Following after righteousness, knowing that the blessings you have are things that you should be able to speak about and to articulate, and to be able to sing and to pray even at the end of the day. At the end of this psalm, at the end of Psalm 4, verse 7, you have put gladness in my heart, more than in the season that their grain and wine increase. I will both lie down in peace and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. I would ask you to underline that word alone. There is no one else that can give you the kind of sleep that the Lord can give you and the kind of rest that he provides. In the 42nd Psalm, Psalm 42 and starting at verse 6. Psalm 42 and verse 6. O my God, my soul is cast down within me. Therefore I will remember you from the land of the Jordan, from the heights of Hermon, from the hill of Mizar. Deep calls unto deep at the noise of your waterfalls. All your waves and billows have gone over me. The Lord will command his loving kindness in the daytime, and in the night his song shall be with me. A prayer to the God of my life. I will say to God, my rock, why have you forgotten me? Why do I go mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? As with a breaking of my bones, my enemies reproach me, while they say to me all day long, where is your God? And this is what he says to himself again. Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you disquieted within me? Hope in God, for I shall yet praise him, the help of my countenance and my God. To be able at the end of the day to sing and to pray. Wouldn't it be a lot better to end the day with singing and praying other than CNN? Wouldn't it be a lot better to end the day with singing and praying than Fox News? To end the day with singing and praying instead of Twitter and Facebook. Wouldn't it be a lot better to end the day singing and praying to our God than whatever the next story is that's meant to divide us all from one another? God doesn't want you sleeping or trying to sleep, trying to solve the world's problems in your own mind. You can't do it. It's not your job. It's not your job. Stay in your lane. It's not yours. Again, sometimes the most righteous and godly thing that we can do is to lay our head on our pillow and go to sleep. Because we know that God is going to protect us, and we know that we are at peace with our God. And isn't that the most important? More than anything else. One last place I want us to look, and that's in Proverbs chapter 3. And I can remember that before I had obeyed the gospel, this was a sermon or a verse that really spoke an entire sermon to me, it seemed. Verse 24 of Proverbs 3. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. Yes, you will lie down and your sleep will be sweet. You know, when you know that you're not right with God, when you know that heaven's not going to be your home, it's pretty hard to have a good night's sleep. But knowing that there is a way, that you don't have to be afraid that when you hear a thunderstorm coming up, oh no, What if a tornado comes through and takes me and I haven't made things right with God? What if I get in my car tomorrow and have an accident and I haven't made things right with God? What if some disease creeps in and I haven't made my peace with God? And to be terrified of those things. And this verse said that when you lie down, you will not be afraid. Brethren, how many of us would love to have that right now? To be able to lie down at night and just not be afraid of anything. To get those voices out of your head. To stop listening to what you think other people are saying. What might happen if you make this decision or that decision. To be able to sleep and not be afraid. And as it says in verse 25, of any sudden terror, nor of trouble from wicked when it comes. For the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being caught. The reason being is because, as the writer says, they followed after the way of wisdom. Earlier in chapter 2, in verses 1 through 5, he says, my son, receive my words. When you go to chapter 4, one of the things that you see at the beginning of that one is that in verse 3, when I was my father's son. In verse 4, he also taught me and said to me that this is advice that's been handed down throughout their family. And what good advice it is to hand down to our children and teach them not to be worried like their parents always were, but to be confident like their parents are supposed to be. My son, if you receive my words, treasure my commands, incline your ear to wisdom, apply your heart to understanding, cry out for discernment, lift up your voice for understanding, seek her as you would silver, search for her as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Then you will be able to have a good night's sleep. When our days have been spent that way, it makes our sleep sweet. Notice some of the blessings that come from that in verse 27. What are some of the things we're supposed to be doing during the day? Don't withhold good from those to whom it is due. So don't withhold it, but also when it's in your power to do so, don't say to your neighbor, go and come back and I'll give it to you tomorrow. So don't withhold it and don't delay it either. Verse 29, do not devise evil against your neighbor. This is the reason, for he dwells by you for safety. Why did people not used to lock their doors years ago? Because they knew they had a neighbor who would come over and fight off whoever tried to break in your house with you. Because we knew our neighbor. We talked with our neighbor. Our neighbor had similar values to us. Not anymore. But this is the blessing that comes from being that kind of neighbor with others. Don't strive with a man without a cause. How many are being told to strive with other people for no reason whatsoever? But we're supposed to be mad about something. Turn on the TV. Let me hear what it is I'm supposed to be mad about today. Who am I supposed to hate today? Don't devise those things. Don't strive with a man without a cause. If he has done you no harm, why would you do that? Do not envy the oppressor. Don't choose any of his ways. Don't choose to be on the side of whoever it is who's the most powerful, that's oppressing other people. Verse 30, for the perverse person is an abomination to the Lord. His secret counsel is with the upright. The curse of the Lord is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the just. Surely he scorns the scornful, but he gives grace to the humble. The wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the legacy of fools. Hear my instruction, O my children, he says. Listen to this. This is how you can lie down at night, not be afraid, and when you sleep, it's sweet. It's actually peaceful, the way it's supposed to be. Jesus was in a boat one time with his apostles, and there was a horrible storm that come up, and the boat was filling with water, and the disciples thought they were going to die, and Jesus was fast asleep. Why didn't you have any faith? We can have a good night's sleep when we trust in the Lord who preserves us. We know we're okay with him, even with no one else. And I'll be able to make it through the night just fine with that knowledge. So the question I'm going to leave with you is this one, is will you be able to sleep well tonight? If you're not a Christian, I pray that you don't have a good night's sleep. I pray that you can't close your eyes. And I pray that it bothers you, because the God who does not sleep, who does not slumber, wants you so badly to be one of his children, so that you can really enjoy the peace that only God provides. If you've had trouble sleeping because you're not a Christian, take care of that today. And it'll be a much different sleep than you've ever known. If you've got sin in your life, or there's something that's got you separated from God, be able to go to sleep tonight knowing that you took care of that to the best of your ability, knowing that God has forgiven and that you're one of his. If we can help you with that, that's what we want to do, because we want everybody to be able to go to heaven, and we want to help in every way that we can. So if you're subject to the invitation, please come as together we stand and sing.